Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Always fun to dig into something new.
Right. Well, today we're looking at something I think we can all relate to.
Oh, yeah.
Procrastination.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It is. And we actually got a really interesting episode of the English Speaking Podcast from one of our listeners.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's all about tips for getting things done. But here's the thing.
Okay.
It's not just about being lazy. It actually digs into some deeper emotions that might be behind why we put things off.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, it really does.
Like when you think about it,
Yeah.
like why do we put things off?
Well, so the podcast actually defines procrastination as delaying tasks that we know we should be doing in favor of less important things.
Oh, so it's like cleaning your whole house before sitting down to pay bills.
Exactly. Or suddenly reorganizing your entire sock drawer seems way more appealing than finishing that report that's due tomorrow.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
And I thought this was a really interesting point that they made in the podcast. They were talking about how, for English language learners in particular,
Oh, okay.
a big task might feel like, oh my gosh, I have to learn all of these irregular verbs.
Right.
And so you just avoid it completely.
You just don't even start.
You don't even start because it feels so overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a great comparison, I think, for anybody, but especially for language learners.
Yeah. And the podcast goes on to say that, this isn't because we're lazy. It's because there are actually these deeper feelings like a fear of failure or perfectionism or just feeling overwhelmed by the sheer size of the task.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So let's say, for example, you're trying to learn English and you need to write an essay for class or something like that.
Okay.
But you're terrified of making mistakes or you're worried about your grammar not being perfect or not sounding fluent.
Oh, for sure.
Would that fear lead you to maybe procrastinate on starting that essay?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like 100%.
Right.
That fear would totally make you avoid it.
Yeah.
And actually, I think that's like the perfect example of, that fear of failure. And what's cool is the podcast even gives us a strategy for dealing with this particular fear.
Oh, perfect.
They talk about breaking down a task like that essay into smaller steps.
So instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I have to write this entire essay,
Yeah,
you can maybe say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, I'm just going to brainstorm ideas.
exactly. And that feels so much less scary, right?
Way less intimidating.
They even talk about like setting a timer for 5 minutes and telling yourself, okay, I can stop after 5 minutes if I want to.
That's interesting.
But that usually helps you get over that initial hurdle of just starting.
Yeah, it's like tricking your brain into getting started.
Total.
Now, I've also heard this called like the 5-minute rule before. But wouldn't breaking down tasks into all of these smaller steps maybe make some people feel even more overwhelmed?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because then it's like you have 10 tiny tasks
Right.
instead of one big one.
Instead of just the one big one.
Yeah,
You know what? The podcast actually talks about that.
they do.
Yeah, they say that for some people, having too much structure can actually backfire.
Really?
Yeah, so they recommend like kind of experimenting to find what works best for you.
So some people might really thrive on having those detailed lists,
Exactly, and like really specific steps.
whereas other people might need more flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's all about figuring out what works for you.
Yeah, being self-aware.
Right. So finding that balance.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of feeling stuck, perfectionism is another thing that can really lead to procrastination.
Oh, totally.
Wouldn't you say?
100%.
Yeah, and this is where I think the podcast gives some really insightful advice.
Yeah.
Because they talk about how perfectionism often comes from this fear of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly for language learners who might be worried about making mistakes in front of others.
Yeah, like you're trying to learn this new language and you want to get it perfect.
Right.
But the fear of making a mistake or saying the wrong thing can just completely paralyze you.
And you just don't speak.
Yeah, you end up saying nothing.
Right. And so what I think is really interesting is they don't just say, stop being a perfectionist.
Right.
Like, they actually give a concrete strategy for dealing with it.
Okay. I like
And it actually goes back to that 5-minute rule that we were just talking about.
Interesting.
So if you're someone who gets stuck on a writing assignment
Yeah.
because you're trying to make every sentence absolutely perfect before you move on.
Oh, yeah. I know a lot of people like that.
Yeah, you could tell yourself, okay, I'm just going to write for 5 minutes and it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just going to get my ideas down.
Just get it out there.
Yeah.
I love that.
And the key is really shifting your focus from perfection to progress.
Yeah. Just making any progress.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
So what about when we're not necessarily afraid of making mistakes, but we just feel completely overwhelmed by the task itself?
Oh, yeah.
Like, we look at it, we think, this is just way too much. I can't even begin to start this.
Yeah, it's like that feeling of just being frozen.
Yeah, you're totally frozen.
Yeah. And a lot of times I think that comes from a lack of clarity or structure around the task.
So it's not even just the size of the task. It's more that feeling of like, I don't even know where to begin.
Right. You don't know where to start.
Yeah.
And so you just don't.
And the podcast has a really good strategy for this.
Oh, bet.
They talk about the importance of setting deadlines and rewards.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, so tell me more about that.
So instead of saying, I need to learn these 50 new English words,
Yeah.
you could set a deadline like, okay, I'm going to learn 10 new words a day for the next 5 days.
So that breaks it down into much more manageable chunks.
Exactly. And the reward is where the fun comes in.
Okay, tell me about the rewards.
So you get to pick something that you really enjoy and you link it to achieving your goal.
Okay.
So maybe after you learn those 10 words, you get to have a cup of your favorite coffee or tea,
Oh, nice.
or watch an episode of your favorite show.
So it's like giving yourself a little mini celebration for each step along the way.
Totally.
I love that.
So you stay motivated.
That's a great way to stay motivated.
Yeah.
What about when you're just not feeling motivated in general?
Oh, no.
Like you're not afraid of the task, it's
Uh.
not overwhelming, you just plain don't want to do it.
Oh, yeah, we've all been there.
We've all been there.
I think that's where understanding, like, the power of your environment comes in.
Okay, so how does our environment affect our motivation?
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
If you're trying to study English, but your phone is buzzing with notifications and the TV is on in the background,
Oh, yeah.
it's going to be pretty hard to focus.
It's like trying to study at a party, you're going to get distracted.
Exactly. You're not going to get anything done.
Yeah. And so the podcast really emphasizes how important it is to eliminate those distractions and to try to create a dedicated study space where you can really focus.
Like a quiet corner of the library.
Oh, yeah. Or maybe a desk in a room where you can shut the door and just minimize anything that's going to pull your attention away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they even recommend using those productivity apps or website blockers,
Oh, yeah.
where you can block.
Block those tempting websites that just
Yes.
suck you right in.
It's like giving yourself a little nudge in the right direction.
I love that. So we've talked about all these really practical strategies for dealing with these specific procrastination triggers. But the podcast also goes into some broader mindset shifts
Okay.
that can really help us in the long run.
In the long run.
Yeah. And I think those are really fascinating. So what are some of those key shifts that we need to make if we really want to conquer procrastination?
Well, podcast talks about focusing on progress over perfection,
Oh,
visualizing the end result, and practicing self-compassion.
those are really good ones.
Yeah, and I think, that first one, focusing on progress over perfection, is so important for language learners. Because it's so easy to get caught up in, like, the nuances of grammar
Right.
or pronunciation and just lose sight of the bigger picture.
You might be so worried about sounding like a native speaker that you're afraid to even open your mouth.
Exactly. And you end up just not speaking at all.
Right.
And so the podcast really encourages us to celebrate those small victories.
Okay. I like that.
Did you learn a new phrase today?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Right.
Did you manage to have a short conversation in English?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Like each step forward is a win, even if it's not perfect.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
And I love how they connect that to the idea of visualizing the end result.
Oh, yeah.
So instead of dwelling on like the challenges,
Right.
they suggest picturing what it would feel like to actually achieve your goal.
Okay.
So if you're learning English, imagine yourself like confidently having a conversation with a native speaker.
Yes.
Or like picking up a book in English and reading it without needing a dictionary.
I love that. Like I can practically feel that sense of accomplishment just thinking about it.
Yeah.
And it really helps to like fuel your motivation to push through those moments of like doubt or frustration.
Yeah, for
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay, now the last mindset shift that they talk about is practicing self-compassion.
Yes.
And this one really resonates with me
Oh, me too.
because it's just so easy to be hard on ourselves.
Especially when we're learning something new.
Yeah.
Like we expect ourselves to be perfect right away.
Right, and we make mistakes and we stumble and we have days where it feels like we're not making any progress at all.
Totally. And you know what the podcast says? It's okay.
It is okay.
It's all part of the process.
It is.
It's totally normal.
Yeah, so instead of beating ourselves up for not being perfect,
Right.
we should treat ourselves with the same kind of understanding that we would offer a friend.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and they actually have a really practical suggestion for how to do this.
Okay.
They talk about the importance of shifting our language.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of saying, ugh, I'm so bad at this,
Yeah.
Try saying, I'm still learning and that's okay.
I love that simple shift in our self-talk.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
So we've covered all these amazing mindset shifts,
Okay.
but I'm curious, how do we actually put these into practice in our daily lives?
That's where all those practical strategies that we were talking about before come in.
Okay.
Like remember how important it is to create a dedicated study space
Mm-hmm.
and minimize those distractions?
All right.
Well, those strategies are going to be even more powerful
Okay.
when you combine them with these mindset shifts.
So it's not just about like having the quiet room to study in. It's also about approaching your study session with that focus on progress over perfection
Yes, exactly.
and treating yourself with kindness and understanding.
I love that.
Yeah.
It all works together.
And the podcast even suggests incorporating these mindset shifts into our daily routine.
Like making it a habit.
Yeah, and they have a really specific strategy that I really like. Oh,
They say, start each day by reviewing your goals
oh yeah.
and reminding yourself why they're important to you.
It's like setting an intention for the day.
Exactly.
Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, and aligning your actions with your values.
Right. And, when you constantly remind yourself of your goals and your why, you're way more likely to stay motivated
Definitely.
and push through those moments of procrastination.
Yeah, and let's not forget to celebrate those little wins along the way.
Oh, yes. Those are so important.
Like every time we achieve a mini goal, every time we push past a procrastination hurdle,
Yes.
we should really take a moment to acknowledge our progress.
Celebrate it.
Yeah, and appreciate how far we've come.
Those little celebrations keep us moving forward,
Totally.
keep us motivated.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah?
Now, before we wrap up this section of the deep dive,
Okay.
I want to kind of circle back to something we touched on earlier. And that's the unique challenges that I think English language learners face when it comes to procrastination. Yeah, that's a really important point.
Right, because learning a new language requires so much time and effort
It does.
and consistent practice.
And it's easy to get discouraged.
Yeah, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed or discouraged, especially when you hit those setbacks or those plateaus.
Totally. And I think it's in those moments of doubt that procrastination can really creep in.
Yes.
We tell ourselves like, I'm not good at this, or I'll never be fluent.
Right, and it's like that negative self-talk can just completely sabotage our progress.
Yeah, it can really hold us back.
It really can. And so this is where I think the podcast's emphasis on self-compassion is so important.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that learning a language is a journey.
It's not a race.
It's not a destination, it's a journey. There are going to be ups and downs, and there are going to be moments of frustration.
Of course.
And there are going to be times when you just want to give up.
But by practicing self-compassion,
Yeah.
we can kind of navigate those challenges with more grace and resilience.
Yeah, it's like giving ourselves permission to be a learner,
Exactly.
to make mistakes.
Yes.
And to grow at our own pace.
I love that. And by embracing that learner mindset,
Yeah.
we can actually transform those moments of procrastination into opportunities for growth and self-discovery.
Okay, so we challenged our listener at the beginning of this deep dive
Yes.
to choose one small step to take today,
Mhm.
to move forward on something that they've been putting off.
Right.
I'm wondering, have you had a chance to think about what that one small step could be?
I'm sure there are a lot of ideas floating around.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't have to be this huge task.
Right.
It could be something as simple as, spending 5 minutes practicing pronunciation,
Okay.
or writing like a short paragraph in English about their day, or even listening to like a 5-minute English language news clip.
So it's really about breaking that cycle of inaction.
Yes, just taking that first step.
And taking that first step no matter how small it is.
Exactly. And as you continue to take action, even in small ways, you'll start to build momentum and confidence.
And the podcast reminds us that consistency is key.
It is.
Even those small actions repeated over time lead to significant progress.
Absolutely. It's like that saying, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Yeah.
Learning a language, or really achieving any goal for that matter, takes time, patience, and consistent effort.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
So to our listener who's on this journey of conquering procrastination and mastering English,
Yes.
remember that you are capable of achieving your goals.
You can do it.
You have the tools and the strategies to overcome those procrastination hurdles, and you have the power to choose action over inaction.
One small step at a time.
One small step at a time. I love that. Wow, we covered a lot in this deep dive into procrastination.
I know. It's amazing how much we got out of just that one episode of the English Speaking Podcast.
Right, and it's so relevant for
Yeah.
anyone, but I think especially for people learning English.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It just gave us so much to think about.
Not just in terms of managing our time,
Right.
but like our mindset and our self-talk.
It's not just about checking things off the to-do list.
Right.
It's about how we approach things,
Yeah.
with purpose and kindness and being aware of, what's going on in our own heads.
Yeah, I think that's something that anyone can benefit from.
Totally.
Whether they're learning a language
Yeah.
or starting a business.
Or just like trying to get through the day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some of the key takeaways?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah, like what are the most important things our listener can take away from this?
Well, I think the biggest thing to remember is that procrastination is something that everybody struggles with.
It's so common.
It is. So don't beat yourself up about it.
Yeah.
It's not a sign of weakness or failure or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's usually a sign of something else going on, like, deeper emotions like fear or overwhelm or perfectionism.
Mm-hmm.
And, once you understand what's causing it.
Yeah. You can start to address it in a more compassionate and effective way.
And that leads perfectly into the next key takeaway,
Okay.
which is that it's so important to combine practical strategies with these mindset shifts.
Yes, you have to have both.
You can't just have one or the other.
Right. You can make all the lists and set deadlines.
Right.
But if you don't have the right mindset, it's
Yeah.
not going to work.
Yeah, you need both.
Yeah, so those practical steps, breaking down tasks, setting deadlines,
Mhm.
creating routines, minimizing distractions,
Mm.
those are all important.
Yeah.
But they're way more powerful when you combine them with that focus on progress over perfection
Right.
and visualizing the end result
Mm.
and, being kind to yourself.
Yes, self-compassion.
Self-compassion, yes.
It's so important.
Yeah, so it's like having a whole toolbox,
Oh, I like that.
yeah, with all the different tools
You got your tools.
that you need to succeed.
And your mindset strategies.
Yeah, it's all connected.
Love it. Okay, so I think the final and maybe most important takeaway from all of this is the power of actually taking action.
Oh, yeah. You got to do it.
You can't just talk about it.
We can plan and strategize and dream about our goals forever,
Right.
but it's the actual doing,
The doing.
the steps that we take that really make the difference.
So true. And the podcast really encouraged us to just start small.
Yeah.
Like pick something small and manageable and do it.
And celebrate it.
Yeah, celebrate those small wins.
Because consistency is key.
Yeah.
And for someone who's learning English,
Hmm.
that's especially important.
Right.
Because it is a long game.
Yeah, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
And you have to just keep showing up,
Every day.
even when you don't feel like it.
Even when you don't feel like it,
Yeah.
because those small efforts add up over time.
Absolutely.
I love that.
So I thought it was really interesting how the podcast ended.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
They actually gave us this challenge.
Okay.
And I think it's perfect for our listeners, too.
What is it?
So they said to choose one small step
Mm-hmm.
that you can take today.
Today.
Yes. To move forward on something that you've been putting off.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah. So what do you think could our listeners benefit from that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
It's a great way to put all of this into practice.
exactly.
So what would you suggest our listeners do for that one small step?
Well, it doesn't have to be anything big.
Right.
Like it could be reviewing 5 new vocabulary words,
Okay.
or writing a paragraph in English about their day,
Mm-hmm.
or listening to a 5-minute English news clip.
Something really manageable,
Yeah, exactly. Something
Big.
small and achievable and,
but that moves you toward your goal.
yes, toward that goal of mastering English.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Awesome.
And it really wraps up everything we've talked about today.
Yeah, brings it all together.
It's about understanding why we procrastinate,
Right.
equipping ourselves with the right tools and the mindset shifts,
Yes.
and then taking that first step, no matter how small,
And trusting the process.
trusting that it will lead us to where we want to go.
Exactly.
It's been so great exploring this topic with you.
It has been a pleasure.
And to our listener, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into conquering procrastination.
We applaud your dedication to learning English
Yes, and we hope you've gained some valuable insights
and tools to help you move forward.
with confidence and clarity.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy learning.